Hey Collectibros, it's me, Shinobi Nando, and welcome to my review of Resident Evil Village. Firstly, I need to start off this video by thanking Capcom UK and Europe for providing me with a review code. Without them, this review possibly wouldn't have been done in time. As you could see in the background there, I had some things to unbox. I absolutely loved Resident Evil 7, and if you did, then you're in for a surprise. The story picks up exactly 3 years after the events in Louisiana. Ethan and Mia now live with their young daughter Rose in Europe. That's all I got for you. Europe. It's almost kind of a funny trope that Americans and maybe even the Japanese just kind of think of Europe as one big country. They've been relocated here by Chris Redfield, and Ethan has even apparently undergone some military training, which explains his use of various weapons, which we'll get into later in the gameplay section. As seen in the trailer, events unfold and we end up in the quote-unquote village. From here, Ethan sets out to rescue his newly born daughter Rose, and she's been kidnapped by this cult or religious faction. I'm not quite sure what they are. The game doesn't really settle on anything too concrete, and Capcom used this mystery to kind of introduce Resident Evil Universe's versions of werewolves, vampires, and other movie monster classics. Now, I was shocked to find out, while thematically very different, as Resident Evil 7 themes and tropes where each of the different family members represented a different kind of modern horror genre, such as Saw, The Hills Have Eyes, or Texas Chainsaw Massacre. If it wasn't obvious, Resident Evil Village takes inspiration from classic movie monster trope, which was shocking when you realize how intertwined and connected the two stories are between the two games. Again, the locales and themes are so different in this one that it actually took me by a bit of surprise. I can't talk about too much of the story in this spoiler-free review without revealing anything, and the twists and turns of a horror game makes it what it is. Now, I will say this, there is some issues with Ian's dialogue and character in general, but in a charming way, he kind of captures that classic B-movie type aesthetic that Resident Evil always has been about before the recent remakes and games. Although it is a bit jarring how he reacts really unnatural to things, or the way he kind of just describes things and spouts exposition like, "Oh my gosh, it's dark in here. What the hell was that? That building's on fire." While not very long, I beat the game personally in about 8.5 hours doing all the side missions, quests, collectibles, etc. The story is well paced and never overstays its welcome. One thing about horror games you have to remember is they're very stress inducing. If a horror game or movie goes on for too long, or you see too much of the creatures or monsters, they tend to become less scary and more annoying. Thankfully, for the most part, this doesn't really happen in Resident Evil Village. Another interesting aspect of the story is how they took these classic monsters and kind of inserted them into the Resident Evil universe. There is no magic here. This is just simply another form of mutated life like Las Plagas or the progenitor virus. Also, be on the lookout because it also very neatly ties in to the core lore of the series. The village itself has its own backstory and lore, read to us conveniently through Mia as she gives her daughter a bedtime story. And you can really see how they were going for this real and very present threat, going into mystery and becoming these monsters that we've read about, such as Dracula, Frankenstein, and the werewolf. And they make for absolutely fantastic enemies in this game and provide a lot of variety. The gameplay in this game is essentially Resident Evil 7, with hints of Resident Evil 4 mixed in. Now, this could have very easily just been an excuse or a vehicle for a Resident Evil 4 remake, and it very much is at the same time. It neatly combines the kind of new inventory management and item system with the existing one from Resident Evil 4 to kind of make its own take on it, even including a character such as the Duke, where you can sell crystals and items that you find around the castle and village, buy upgrades for your weapons or new weapons altogether. But much like the other games, you can find your own attachments and upgrades throughout the world, especially if you do one of the many bonus objectives. Gunplay is really solid here, and they took a bit of what they added from the Chris DLC, such as the ability to knock away enemies after blocking, which is really helpful because unlike the previous game, you're not just fighting mindless molded, you're actually fighting thinking creatures. Well, mostly thinking creatures. There's some like ghoul type things that don't seem like they can use swords and axes and crossbows and stuff. Those ghouls in particular to me scream reskins of Las Plagas characters, but even the Lycans kind of fall into that. Although the way they move and attack you and the sheer amount of bullets they can take do make them very different and distinct enemies. One thing this game had that really shocked me was the sheer amount of exploration you can do in the village. There's loads to do and lots of backtracking. There's hidden areas and Easter eggs, upgrades. There's a new hunting mechanic that replaces the previous upgrade system, where if you bring the Duke various meats and poultry that you find around the village, he will cook you meals that permanently upgrade your stats. Don't be like me and accidentally sell the meat though to the Duke, because I found a lot of the animals before that feature unlocked, and let's just say it made my playthrough a little bit harder. Hey, who doesn't like a challenge? Speaking of which, as mentioned before, while the Lycans can be a bit bullet spongy, I actually found the game to be very easy. A lot of the bosses I did without getting hit once, and to be honest, a lot of the enemies, such as the ghouls, are just there to be farmed. Much like Resident Evil 4, they'll drop money, items, ammunition, crafting materials. Early game when the enemies are weaker, this kind of really removes any horror or tension in some of the sections, as I stopped seeing them as monsters and more as like walking coin purses. There were clearly sections where, at least on my first playthrough, I was meant to like run or escape, and I just kind of cleared out the area after waves of enemies came at me, because it was more money to buy more upgrades and more weapons. In fact, there's almost too much money given out on this game. Granted, I did go around and purposely farm things and did all the extras and found the collectibles, but even still, I had most of my weapons fully upgraded by the end of the game. While the bosses were easy, and like I said, I did many of them without taking a single hit, they were fun, and each of them were thematic and had a different mechanic to them and different themes. Now, where you will find challenge is later in the game, especially with one of the many optional mini bosses, and man, does this game have a lot of mini bosses. While absolutely bullet sponges, I never felt like they were tedious, and the reward for taking them down was more than worth it. What I did find in the later stages of the game, however, is that it fell upon old mistakes that Capcom made in the past with Resident Evil, such as sending hordes and hordes of enemies at you. A prime example of this is near the end of the game, where you face one mini boss after another in almost a seemingly endless onslaught. And you have to beat these to progress the game. They get increasingly more difficult, but also increasingly more tedious. Now, some of them were fun, and there were some cool mechanics and interesting like loopholes or cheats or cheeses. I don't mean like expletive, I mean like they were built into the game, and if you notice them, it'll really help you out. But also at the same time, it was kind of like, come on, man. Like, give me a freaking break. Fortunately, that's just a very small portion of the game. It does, again, remove a lot of the horror aspects of the game, especially, like I said, there is one section where it is wave after wave after wave of enemy, and like in any good horror movie or game, the more you see of a monster, the less scary it becomes, especially when you're slaughtering them in droves. But please take this criticism with a pinch of salt. That's just my nitpick. This is like a one and done instance. This is not the norm in the game. In fact, one of the scariest things is exploring the village and finding these Lycans where one or two can easily take you down, and having them chase you through the long grass or sneak up on you inside of a house. Speaking of which, they brought back the kind of barricade system from Resident Evil 4. However, with the mechanics of this game and the fact that you're in first person, it actually does really trivialize some of the enemies, especially the Lycans, as you can just kind of, in first person, just take pot shots through the window and clear them out. Even some mini bosses can be cheesed like this. This game is so stylistic. If you liked the super hyper realistic or photorealistic visuals from Resident Evil 7 or the Resident Evil 2 remake, then you're in for a treat. This game looks even better on the RE engine. Some of the visuals are so disturbing in this game because of its photorealism that honestly, it might not scare you through the horror aspects of the enemies, but the visuals alone, there's a particular part or a particular level, and yeah, if you don't get nightmares, you are a mental fortitude greater than mine. I had high hopes after playing Devil May Cry and seeing what they could do towards the end of the last generation's life cycle and next gen. It really highlights, however, that Resident Evil 7 kind of really was the first kind of experience they had developing on this engine, as even characters like Mia look phenomenal, and Chris in particular looks so much better and closer to his movie and video game counterparts. I mean, like the old game and the CGI movies, you know, the computer generated, not the live action movie. I mean, I like them, they're guilty pleasures, but that was not Chris Redfield. The village itself looks great, although again, I can't help but notice that this is going to be a very easy reskin for them to do Resident Evil 4. I keep on bringing this up a lot, and I want to stress that this game does not just feel like a first-person Resident Evil 4. There are instances where it feels like a first-person Resident Evil 4, but it is very much its own thing. Everything looks great, from the monsters, from Lady D, from the Duke, from the environments. I mean, at this point, how much more can I gush about the RE engine? It's the RE engine, it looks phenomenal. While it seems like a kind of a weird section to discuss this, leading into the art design are the puzzles. Now, they are subtly hidden everywhere in the background. You have to keep a keen eye out. These are some of the most fun puzzles I've had in a Resident Evil game. They were the right balance of challenging but not frustrating. I never really felt stuck. And being in first person, once again, they are pretty much all visual based, which is why I'm talking about them here. But of course, what always helps sell the visuals is the audio. The audio for this game is great. I didn't really notice any kind of distinct music or anything like that, kind of like Aunt Rudy from Resident Evil 7. The guns sound great, the monsters sound terrifying, especially I played in surround sound, hearing those footsteps as they creep along, or hearing them, the Lycans scurry across the roofs. That is horrifying. Good sound design can make or break survival horror, and no, they nailed it, man. They nailed it. You will get jump scared from sound alone in this game. Nothing is scarier than hearing Lady D's footsteps from miles away, knowing that she's closing in on you in the castle, and you gotta hide.
Stupid man thing! You won't live long, even if you run!
Now, one thing that really did irk me, and this could just be me personally, is the voice direction. I'm not saying the voice direction is bad. The voice acting is great in this. All the voice actors do a phenomenal job, even with Ethan's cheesy or exposition or cliche dialogue. The bit that kind of really bugged me was the fact that everyone in Europe, I don't know where in Europe, I'm gonna guess Eastern Europe, maybe Northern Europe, but everyone in Europe seems to speak fluent American English. Even Resident Evil 4 had the characters speak with a Spanish or Catalan accent. Now, I do know a lot of Europeans, especially the Germans and the Nordics, they all sound very American. They're taught American English in school. So yes, this isn't too weird, but everyone in the village speaks with an American accent. But, you know, these are all nitpicks. The most important thing here is, like I said, the sounds are going to scare you. The monster roars are going to send chills down your bones. And hearing Lady D's footsteps echo throughout the castle are going to make you turn tail and run and hide. Guys, this game was phenomenal. Yes, it is short. If I didn't do all the collectibles, I probably would have beaten this game in 6 hours. Now, I did beat it in 8.5, but it felt much longer, and I'm more than happy to go and replay this game. There are still things that I miss trying to do everything. There are new weapons that I've unlocked after beating the game, new difficulty modes. I'm sure there's new secrets and cheeses that for the bosses that I missed. This game is so good. I love how this story is its own unique thing on the one hand, and yet on the other hand ties up loose ends and intertwines with the existing Resident Evil universe and the new established lore from Resident Evil 7. I'm not gonna say everything's nicely tied up in a bow, but Questions are answered, mysteries are solved, new ones are introduced for future entries. Some of them I didn't expect, some of them were blatantly obvious. The gunplay is good, the enemy variety is insane, there's so many different enemies. I was first worried that having 4 lords of the village and each of them representing a different movie monster trope would kind of feel weird or disjointed. No, it doesn't. It really ties in, even though if initially it is jarring. The only thing I will say, and this will be a very, very tiny minor spoiler, is obviously I'm sad to say that Lady D doesn't quite play as big a role as a lot of you are hoping. I think maybe the marketing kind of got away with that one and ran with it. And that's the only bit I think that will disappoint some fans is, yeah, if you're doing it for the giant goth lady, you need to get your priorities straight, and possibly a counselor, not to king shame. Right, all step on me memes aside, this game is phenomenal, and I'm happy to give it a gold star. This is my second highest rating that I can give. Is this game perfect? No, it's a bit on the short side. Some of the sections really gave me like Resident Evil 6 or Resident Evil 5 flashbacks. The end kind of overstayed its welcome just a little bit, even despite how short this game is. And it's not quite as scary as the previous entry, especially with the whole farming enemies for money and loot mechanic. Like honestly, they will become walking purses. Just trust me, power through, kill a load of them, collect the cash, upgrade your weapons, you're laughing. Honestly guys, I get that it's a massive criticism to spend $60 to $70 on a game and it only be 6 to 8 hours, but this game does have replayability. It is survival horror. You don't want a survival horror to be that long. And I honestly don't know how else they could have made this game any longer without it feeling forced or overstaying its welcome or just padding. I mean, I suppose they could have slightly allowed a bit more backtracking in some of the areas, or maybe expand the village a little bit more. But again, it's just gonna diminish the tension and the horror even more. Literally the only thing I can think of is maybe the village section. Just made that village a bit bigger, a bit more to explore, maybe a few more secrets, but you're only adding on about a half an hour at that point. Guys, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Are you going to be picking up this game? Was this video informative? Did it help you make a decision? Don't forget to give this video a like and to be sure to check out my Resident Evil Village unboxing, and I will be doing more what's in the boxes and more videos in the future, so hit the notification bell. Plus, don't forget to check me out on Twitch where I will be streaming the game. I will be doing my second and third playthrough over there. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.